Welcome to the Happy Dog Podcast. This podcast is designed to bring you ideas and uplifting information to help you live a meaningful and fulfilled life with your dog from a holistic perspective. Now, let's explore the world of a happy dog. This is episode 5 of the Happy Dog Podcast. This is a solo episode where I'm going to address a question that I get asked all the time on Instagram, on Facebook, emails get sent to me, and that is, how do you properly transition your dog to a raw food diet? There are so many people out there talking about raw food for dogs, and I know it can get overwhelming, to say the least. So my hope is that this episode gives you some direction for yourself so you can understand how you can do best by your dog. The first thing I want to address when it comes to diets for any dog is laying the foundation for how to approach what your dog should be eating in the first place. And I say this because the umbrella statement of all dogs should be on a raw diet is not necessarily correct, nor is it okay, because the fact of the matter is that all dogs are individuals. Not all dogs can tolerate raw diets for various reasons, such as health issues like liver disease, kidney disease, or other complications that come on top of them. And that's something that needs to be taken into consideration with any dog is, who is your dog and what will be the diet that they can thrive on? And it might not be a raw diet. And before I go any further, let me be clear that I'm not talking about, when I say raw diets, about do-it-yourself ratio or percentage-based feeding for raw diets. Because after many canine nutrition courses, so many books read, doing my own research, and trying out different diets with my own dogs, I know firsthand the best way to feed your dog is through science-based nutrition. This means understanding the NRC, which is the National Research Council's nutrient requirements for dogs and cats, and understanding metabolic weights and all sorts of things like that. So when I say a dog might not be able to tolerate a raw diet, I don't mean that from the perspective of using 80-10-10 ratios or giving your dog whatever. I mean science-based approach to feeding a raw diet or just a dog a specific way. Using a scientific approach allows dogs to be fed the best way for them as an individual, whether that's raw, home-cooked, or otherwise. So going back to how to transition your dog to a raw diet that's completely formulated and balanced, whether it's from a nutrition consultant like myself or commercially balanced raw diet, from my perspective, as someone who is a canine nutrition consultant and a continued learner in this field, before you start to think about the how, in terms of how to transition your dog to a raw diet, or any diet for that matter, you really should first evaluate the overall health of your dog, paying close attention to the gut health of your dog. Changing your dog to a raw diet just because you want to, or somebody on the internet says so, doesn't necessarily do anything for your dog long term. I like to approach food as medicine, and when you think about food this way, you can take a wider view of your dog as an individual and filling in any gaps that they might have through food. So things to think about before changing the diet are, when was last time your dog was at the vet, had blood work done, fecal examination? What is the vet's assessment of your dog's overall health and of their gut health? What is your assessment of your dog's behavior, overall coat, stool, all that sort of thing? How can these specific things that I'm calling out and more be improved? You know your dog the best. And so if you feel that something is off, whether it's in their behavior, which could be a sign of gut health imbalance, or let's say ears, eyes, tongue color, gum color, toenails cracking. I mean, there's just so many things. I really think that you, as an owner, should evaluate your dog from head to toenail to really get a grasp on overall health and where things can be improved. So assess your dog's gut health on top of that after you do everything, because this is really the big one, because gut health can impact a dog's entire ecosystem. It does come down to poop in many ways, but also, is your dog vomiting randomly or regularly? Is your dog burping, coughing? Is the throat irritated? Could your dog have acid reflux? Could your dog have IBD, pancreatitis, any of these sort of gut manifestations that might be showing themselves more obviously? And gut imbalances can also manifest themselves in other ways. If you're noticing anything, like I mentioned before, it's best to work with your vet to understand what's happening with your dog's GI system. To give you a little bit of background about how the gut really affects all animals, whether you're human or dog, but I'm going to talk about humans, is that the gut has been shown to affect humans in many ways that show studies where human behavior is largely influenced by our gut microbiome health, or rather, the lack of health in our gut microbiome. Anxiety, depression, mood swings, they're all being shown in studies to correlate with an unhealthy gut microbiome in humans. Now, we don't have much scientific proof of this in dogs yet, but I'll make an educated hypothesis that this is something that we'll be seeing more of as we move forward with understanding dogs and their GI systems and gut health and all that sort of thing. So I'll go ahead and link some really fascinating articles that my nerd self really found interesting. One recent study was actually conducted in toddlers at Ohio State University that shows, and I'm quoting this from the study, there is substantial evidence that intestinal bacteria interacts with stress hormones. And so the main reason I mention all of this is because it really relates to our dogs and even cats too, and their overall health and happiness. While, like I said, there's no scientific studies out there to link poor gut microbiome and poor behavior in dogs or stress or anxiety, it seems like with what we have discovered in humans that it's only a matter of time that we have some scientific proof for this in our dogs. Now, there has been a study that I will also link up in the show notes. It's called the Dietary Manipulation of Canine and Feline Gut Microbiomes, and it is in the University of Illinois Urbana's Journal of Animal Science. And I'm going to read an excerpt straight from it. So it says, recent studies have revealed that the functional capacity of the gastrointestinal microbiota in dogs and cats is quite broad and similar to that of humans and rodent models. Although these populations are quite stable over time, our laboratory has demonstrated that macronutrient profile, which is dietary protein carbohydrate ratios, dietary fiber amount and type, and the form of the food consumed, example, raw versus commercial kibble and things like that, may have dramatic, underline dramatic, effects on the gastrointestinal microbiome of these host species. So, this is my long-winded intro to how to transition your dog to raw food, or honestly to any food, because it has to be specific to your dog. I know my answer to start is not an easy one or one that might even be popular with people, but my answer for how to transition your dog to a raw diet is because I want to take into consideration your entire specific dog, not anybody else's. So if I've unfortunately left you a little bit more confused than you wanted to be, or kind of thinking, well, great, now how do I do this? I can offer you bits of advice on how to approach diet and transition with your dog, but really looking at it from my perspective of your dog specifically, and that way you can make a more educated decision on it, frankly. And yes, there are easy ways to transition your dog to any diet by doing, a fourth of the food, a half of the food, all that sort of thing. But again, we have to go back to the foundation of all of this. And that is, why are you feeding your dog this? And what is it going to help your dog with? And so the transition part of getting your dog acclimated to a new diet isn't as much of what I'm worried about. It's more what I'm worried about is what you're feeding your dog and why. So things I want you to be aware of are who you should take advice from. And that's not necessarily from random strangers on the internet and in Facebook groups. Now, I know technically I could be considered one of those, but I am somebody who has been studying this for a few years now, and I have clients who come to me with nutrition consults for their own dogs, and I've been able to successfully assess food and balancing and formulating and all these sorts of things for individual specific dogs to get them on the right path to health from, a gut standpoint, but also overall. So I want you to really, when you are looking for research, actual research on information about food for your specific dog, I don't believe that Facebook groups are necessarily the best way to do that, and even blogs. And I know I have a blog too, so I'm basically saying, do research outside of your bloggers, your Facebookers, and even your influencers. And that means that you might have to take a class. That means that you might have to go to the PubMed or whatever scientific site it is to look up actual studies on different diets and things like that for dogs. You might have to go to a different vet, a holistic vet. But it's really about finding what works for your dog and doing some educated trial and error in some ways. So if you think your dog really could benefit from a raw diet, sure, you can start doing that, but you might find that maybe it's not working so much. You might need to work with someone like a veterinary nutritionist or a nutrition consultant like myself. And I even don't take on certain cases that I feel like there's other people out there who can do a lot better with a specific dog. I just got asked about a diet for a dog with kidney disease, and I felt like it was something that I wasn't able to take on at this time. And so I referred that dog out to somebody different who does things like me, but has been around for much longer. It's someone that I learned from as well. So my point is that in order to properly transition your dog to a raw diet, let alone any diet, you need to first consult with your dog first and foremost and really get to the bottom of what it is you're looking for out of a diet. Take humans, for example, when we think about what we want to eat or what diet we should be on. I have celiac disease, so gluten-free is something that I deal with and go through every single day. And I curate a diet that can work best for me so that day in and day out I feel fulfilled, but I'm also getting nutrients and I'm also being able to get energy from my food. Those are all similar things that you can take into consideration when it comes to food and your dogs. It can't just be this blank umbrella type approach to every dog should be on this, every dog should be on that, because it's all very different. That's why so many raw food brands, kibble brands, every type of pet food has different types of proteins. They have different types of additional nutrients that they're putting in the food. But the main thing that I hope you take away from this really is the gut health. And like we talked about with Billy Hookman from Answers in the last episode, gut health is so important and probiotics are so important. I would argue, honestly, that point blank, a dog needs probiotics every single day. Irregardless of whatever diet you decide to feed your dog, giving probiotics, and like we talked about with Billy, the best form is raw, live, living probiotics. Giving that is going to help your dog's gut health immensely. And so that's where you need to focus on. That's what I focus on when I get a new nutrition client. How can we assess the gut and what's going on, and what foods are going to help get this dog to where it needs to be, whether it's a diabetic dog or whether it's a senior dog, whether this is a proactive diet for a young adult dog. How can we make sure that this diet is going to give this dog all the nutrients possible, but also reinforce gut health and provide this dog with energy and enough nutrients to thrive on a daily basis and not just survive. In terms of properly transitioning a dog to raw food or any other food, I'm just never going to say, oh, you take X amount of kibble away and put X amount of raw food in, because that would be detrimental for me to just blankly state that when I know nothing about your dog. I don't know if your dog would do great on raw, depending on where it's at in its life. I don't know if it needs maybe just some raw milk. I don't know if maybe it needs a fully homemade cooked diet. Maybe it's lacking in zinc for all we know. Your dog could have some sort of deficiency in vitamin D. There's really so many things that need to be considered. Again, I hope this doesn't overwhelm you, and feel free to ask me any questions that you feel are relevant to this podcast episode. And I just want people to think about their dog as an individual. And when you're thinking about diet, think, okay, what's going on with my dog's gut, and how can I improve the health of my dog's gut? Because as most of us know, over 80% of a dog's immune system is located in their gut system. It's so important. That's why I just talk about gut health all the time with people. If I had to answer this question in one sentence when I'm asked how to properly transition a dog to raw, I would say you need to first consult your dog's gut and then decide on which food to feed. If you want to learn more about nutrition consulting from me, you can on my website, and I'll be sure to link everything up in the show notes. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time.